This is going to be fun. Hopefully you guys are going to have fun. That was really noisy. I know. I co-presented this session a month ago in Chicago with Justin. What's his last name again?
Caldecott.
Caldecott. I thought it was, but that's an award that they give to children's books, the Caldecott Award, and so I got confused and going, wait, did I mix that up somehow?
No, that's right.
No, Justin is the product manager for Deployment Manager, and it was a lot of fun presenting with and teasing Justin. And I intend to do the same thing with Michael.
I'll be gentle on me. It's my first time.
Oh, I'm absolutely, it's all in good fun. It's all in good fun. So hopefully you guys are going to have fun, and you're going to learn some important things that'll help you be more productive. So I have 4:05. You ready to get started?
Yeah, should we shut the door and stop anybody else coming in?
Well, the problem is it's so chilly in here, but it's noisy out there. Which would you guys prefer? Open or closed? Closed. Done. So I'm Alan White. I'm a practice manager for Upsearch in Cleveland. I'm a consulting firm, SQL Server practice. I've been working with SQL Server for 20 years. I've been in IT for almost 40 now. Okay? And Michael?
Only 11 years. I'm a youngster.
Yeah, just a kid. Just a kid. So let's get going. So there's this wonderful white paper. If you didn't pick up a copy of it, there you go. It's a great white paper. Down at the display stations, there were these USB keys that you could pick up. A copy of the white paper is there. You can go to the Redgate site and download it. It talks about the deployment manager. It was written by Justin. Brilliant piece of work. Explains how all of this stuff works in a lot more detail than we can go into in a 1-hour session. All right? But I highly recommend it. Now, I've been a DBA for a long time. I like being a DBA. It's a lot of fun. I get to tell developers, no, right? How many of you guys are DBAs? Not a few. How many are developers? Way more developers. Oh my gosh, we're outnumbered. Sorry, I'm outnumbered. You're in the majority here. As DBAs, we really do like developers, and I'm not saying that because there are more of you in the room than DBAs. I've been a developer. I was a developer long before I ever got into databases. And we like developers. It's just that we have different responsibilities. We have to protect the company's data. You have to give the company more data. Those two come at odds. Right? So we're going to try and make that whole process smoother so we're all on the same page, right? So we've got a development environment, and the developer comes in and uses the table designer. How many of you guys do that? Oh, okay, please, don't do that anymore. Table designer is buggy. Table designer, when you make changes, behind the scenes it does things that you don't necessarily know it's doing, and that can break the database in a really bad way, and it makes... For example, it'll drop and recreate a table when all you're doing is adding a column. Depending on certain conditions, it'll drop and recreate the table and all the data that goes along with it, because all it's doing is making the change that you asked for. Right? The table designer seriously is buggy and continues to be. You're really better off using T-SQL for all of that. It's not hard to learn. All right? But this is the scenario we see in developing applications. Table designer, whatever, changes occur in the development database on an iterative basis as projects happen, right? The development database moves on, and then the changes are in the updated databases. We go through all of this process, making multiple changes. Who remembers one change to the next? I don't remember. We just get to the point where the application works, and then the developer sends the email to the database going, make all the changes in the production database that are in the development database. I know it's true because I've gotten that email way too many times, okay? And I go, how the heck am I supposed to do that? You know, I mean, literally, line by line, you have to go through the database because you don't know what change was made. So we have to then somehow figure out what changes were made, get the applications files from the developer, and then move them on up to production. And how many of you have true QA environments where you can test these deployments? Oh, good. You know, I just had, literally, I went through an email exchange a month ago with a network admin in one of my clients who couldn't justify the creation of a QA environment. Literally, they go from dev directly into production. Sometimes they even modify, work on their changes directly in production, in their production database. Seriously, it's happening today. And that's a huge problem, right? It's not consistent. I can't just repeat that. If something went wrong, I can't go back and try it again. With a proper QA environment, if I've built the scripts properly, yeah, I can do that. It's not consistent. It's not repeatable. How much time did I spend going through that database line by line, trying to figure out what changed? Because as the DBA, the database is my responsibility. And yeah, I've worked in shops where to the development side, the database was just a place to put stuff, and that's why these things kind of happen. It's not a good philosophy, but it is in practice. So it's time-consuming. It's incredibly prone to errors because you end up with data type mismatches a lot of times. You ever see that? Yeah, it's not fun. So there's a single point of failure. This point where we're deploying to production, if something goes wrong, we're toast, right? It's opaque. Nobody knows what's going on. My boss says, just make that happen. He's not a DBA. You know, he's an operations manager. He's overall making sure that the data center is working properly, not the specific application. That's my responsibility. He trusts me to make that happen, right? So, fortunately, Redgate came out with a great product called SQL Compare. Okay, that takes away all of that hassle of going through the database line by line by line to see what changed. It goes through and analyzes all of those changes and can generate a script for me that I can go through and review and make sure it does exactly what I want to do it, and in the way that I want it to be done, not necessarily the way the table designer does it. And then I can be comfortable that I can make those changes. That helps a lot. It's a great start. It's not the whole picture. All I've done is worry about this specific set of changes. So then a couple of years ago, in 2010 I think it was, Redgate brought out SQL source control. Holy cow, this is a sea change. Source control on the database objects. Not only do I have the information about what changed, but I know when it changed and who changed it. So if there's a problem, I can go back to that person and go, hey, this data type causes a mismatch with this application, and we can get that resolved before we go to production with any of this stuff, right? It generates the change scripts from one release to another. Again, it's a great tool, but it's still not the whole process. I still have a timing issue of when I can run that script and when I can get that code in, the application code into production, right? So, Michael.
Ta-da! That's my cue, yes. But this is, before we get on to Deployment Manager, this is the foundational stuff that SQL Source Control uses under the hood to actually get your changes into source control. It's called the scripts folder. It's created by SQL Source Control, and the reason I want to dig into it a bit now is because it's kind of the foundation of how all of the rest of our tools build up into the continuous integration and deployment story. So you kind of need to know what's going on under the hood if you, well, most DBAs want to know what's going on under the hood. Mm-hmm. So what happens is that SQL Source Control represents the entire schema of your database in a set of SQL creation scripts stored in folders which then get added to source control. So it's integrated into your existing source control system. Also, static data gets put in there. So this is the kind of lookup tables that you need that don't form part of your production data. They live with the database schema.
The stuff you created data compare for.
Exactly.
Right?
That's exactly what it is. So source control uses both SQL compare as its schema comparison engine and then data compare to do the static data part of the work. And that folder can also be used with SQL compare to deploy to your production database. No, not to production, is it?
QA.
Yeah, exactly. But yes, you can use that scripts folder to deploy. And then the next step is to automate that process a little using PowerShell. Alan's excited already.
Yeah. You guys do know that I talk about PowerShell just a little bit, like all day tomorrow in a pre-con at PASS. So I get excited when I see companies taking on PowerShell as their tool of choice. Back when PowerShell was created in 2006, it was part of Microsoft's common engineering criteria. It is the scripting language that you will use going forward to manage all of your Windows environment. Especially if you've looked at Windows Server 2012, over 2,300 new commandlets added for that version of the operating system in PowerShell 3.0. Okay, it is the way you will manage SQL Server. On Wednesday afternoon, I've got a session on installing SQL 2012 on Windows Server Core. And I'll show you how you do it on Windows Server 2008 R2 with the old style commands, and I'll show you how you do it in Windows Server 2012 with all PowerShell, because that's what it's designed for. So back at you.
Cool. So using PowerShell and the SQL compare command line, we can automate the process of getting the database schema out of the scripts folder and deployed to a database, your QA database. So I'm going to show you a simple PowerShell script that can do this, if I can find the right window. It's going to appear in a minute. Here we go. Now, you can't read that very well, but you can zoom in a bit.
Uh-oh. What do you guys see? Clear text password of what account? Of the SA password. Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
This is bad.
It's the kind of thing developers do.
Start. I'm a DBA. I can't help it.
Well, we'll fix that later. But for now, you can see that we have a bunch of variables. Yeah, I think we've got that locked down so you can't use it externally, but we'll find out later. So what we're doing is building up a command line for SQL compare here. So we have a path to the SQL compare exe.
How many of you guys know that SQL compare has a command line? Excellent. I didn't. I've always used the GUI.
That's a good question. It's a good idea. If I had my notebook, I'd There may be somebody working on it now because, as Alan said, we're using PowerShell a lot more in the latest things we're working on. And we're planning to be sharing some of our own PowerShell scripts that work in different areas of database deployment. So that's certainly something we'll address. So here I've pointed at a scripts folder. That's what I was telling you about just now. And the server is a variable as well, and the database name. And that /sync command there is telling SQL compare to apply the scripts folder directly to the target database. I can't see the edge of that monitor. Am I on the scroll bar? Yeah, there we go. So having done possibly passing in the authentication, that password that we've left up there, we then call SQL compare and indicate what the exit code was. And the other thing I can show you is the contents of that database scripts folder. A bit more detail. So this is what source control has under the hood. Following it down to tables. All these are a bunch of SQL files, which appears on the wrong monitor again.
Yeah, you're going to have to zoom it there.
There we go. So a bunch of create scripts for the objects in the database.
So what source control is actually maintaining is the scripts for the creation of the database, not the database itself.
Precisely. And hey, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, so you said that SQL could generate scripts so that you can update the production database?
It can do, yes.
Yes, and then you can push that one. So are those kept someplace as well, or do you always dynamically do that?
So if you can bear with me, we get onto that a little bit later. That'd be cool.
What do they say the really good questions are ones that are answered later in the presentation? The best questions are the ones that are answered on the very next slide. Right?
Yeah, not quite that lucky, I'm afraid. So I'm going to show you how that PowerShell script actually works. We're going to create an empty database here.
We can't see that window that you're working in.
No, you can't, can you? And SSMS has decided to freeze on me for a minute.
What's that? Yeah, I know. Hey, it's his laptop, not mine.
Let's try again, shall we? New database. Oh, that appears on the wrong monitor as well. Here we go. That's a really small screen. I have to zoom in for my own good.
Widget simple.
I think there's one too many T's in there, isn't there? Do you mind if I drag it back onto my monitor so I can type on it?
This is one of the interesting things about when you're presenting is how you get used to whether you use a dual monitor scenario or you just simply duplicate. Sorry. I prefer to duplicate just because then I don't run into that.
You don't have this problem.
Yeah, I don't try to look over my shoulder and see what's on the screen.
You can also use the Windows left and right keys to jump from monitor to monitor.
Yeah.
Excellent. That will come in handy. Thanks. Right. So we should have an empty database, which is hopefully called widget simple and sitting down here.
There it is.
There it is, with nothing in it, apart from a few default roles that SQL creates for you. It's what
takes the model database and
exactly. And let's find that PowerShell script. We should be able to run it. PowerShell script. There it is. So you can see that there is compare building up its object model of the database in the script folder and the database that it's deploying to, working out any differences between the two of them, and then applying them to the target database. And that exit code 0 there means that it's all completed successfully. Which trial has expired?
if you go back to your PowerShell ISE,
I think
scroll up
okay.
in your results window, in this window here,
I'm going to turn this
down
off.
in here.
You know what? I'm going to turn this back into duplicate mode because then I can see what on earth's going on. Here we go. The automation license trial has expired, but SQL Compare hasn't. I think that we've got some special powers on our demo laptops. So back to what we were trying to show, which is, there we go, this is easier. Widget simple has now been populated with the entire contents of source control. And that was all done from the command line. So you've seen all this done from the GUI. It's actually nothing particularly revolutionary, but having command line control over it gives you all of the powers you have of PowerShell.
And so if you were to rerun that PowerShell script, it's smart enough to know not to drop and recreate everything?
It is, because it's running in dynamic mode. So it's comparing the contents of that scripts folder against what's actually in the database. So rerunning it again should show that everything is equal and it has no work to do, because it's compare doing the work under the hood with the
scripts.
folder. Yeah. So that's, we've spent a lot of time on that really, but that's, you don't need to see that page. Alan, are you happy? Are you happy, Alan?
I am.
That's your cue.
Oh.
It's going smoothly.
So what we need to do now is, how many of you guys work for companies that create software for distribution? Yeah, enough of you that you know how complicated it is when you have multiple clients all running different versions of the same software. They have different levels of the database, right? And you have to maintain, and I know the companies that I've worked for in the past that have had this, we've had folders of 4.0 to 4.2, 4.2 to 4.4, 4.4 to 4.7, those kinds of folders. And when you've got a company that's on 4.0 and they're going to 5.2, you've got to run the folders in the proper sequence to make all this stuff happen. That's kind of a problem, isn't it? So how have you addressed that?
So the next stage you have is to automate the generation of the scripts. And you can see this. This is a plugin that we're working on for a continuous integration server called TeamCity.
How many of you guys went to the continuous integration session earlier? Good.
So you're familiar with the concepts of continuous integration?
Why don't you just, for those who weren't here, why don't you kind of run through that a little bit? Because I'm kind of fuzzy on it. Okay. I'm a DBA. I don't do that continuous stuff.
So TeamCity's one implementation of the concept of a continuous integration server. And the idea is that the server sits and monitors source control for changes to your source code, whether that's application source code or with SQL source control, that becomes database schema source code as well. And as soon as a change is made and committed to source control, your continuous integration server builds it. For the application code, that means building the application and generating you a compiled executable. For a database, it means generating, well, the way we've implemented it, it means generating upgrade scripts and creation scripts for the database, running them against a continuous integration database, and testing that those changes have worked correctly. So that's what this plugin is to help you automate. If you don't have TeamCity, we also have provided build scripts to do the same thing in other integration servers. I don't know what you guys are using. Any other names?
Cruise control.
Cruise control, cool. Yeah, so anything that can use a command line, which they can all do, that's how they kind of start, can run our scripts. But with this plugin that we're working on in TeamCity, you get a little bit of a prettier GUI to let you specify the database that's the source, target database that you want to update, and you can put the password in there if you want to, instead of supplying it in your scripts.
No. It's specifically the table designer. Specifically the table designer. It's buggy, and it has been since at least 7.0. You don't want to use that for making production changes to your database for that reason.
It does exactly what you tell it to do, but
it doesn't
really know what you're telling it to do.
Yeah, seriously, try this on your test, your own personal machine, and run Profiler and watch what it does for some of the changes that you do. It's really kind of nasty sometimes. There's a reason they pulled that from SQL 2012 Management Studio. Oh yeah, yeah. It does the same thing the table designer does, because when you work in that diagram editor, it's making changes to the database, and not necessarily in the right way.
If you're doing something other than just dropping a table
So yeah, it was a nice idea. It was a space that other companies have fulfilled rather well. And no, not Visio. Visio actually did work back at one release. But no, I'm talking about things like Toad Data Modeler, Irwin, Embarcadero. They all have good data modeling tools that generate proper scripts for this kind of work. But the diagram editor does not.
So does Redgate have a tool that
Redgate does not have an entity relationship modeling tool.
So you do the alters and the drops and all of that?
Yeah, I do everything in T-SQL when it comes to that. Absolutely. And have for a very long time. SQL Compare will, yes, because it can compare the objects themselves, and it can generate those scripts. Then you can look at those scripts to see what it does to make sure it is not going to hurt you. Because that's the problem. Table Designer will hurt you because it doesn't necessarily understand that there's a foreign key relationship there that it eliminates so that it can make the change. Haven't you? I have. I have. I've seen it in production, in the real world. So.
I've seen where by default in 2008 R2, if it's going to do a change, like in the diagram editor, if it's going to do a change that's going to end up doing a drop, it will actually not save that, and it will warn you.
Okay.
To say, I'm not going to do this because I would have to drop it, go into options, and go change it if you really wanted to do this.
I've talked to the Microsoft dev team. They don't use it.
Fortunately, SQL Compare does the right thing there.
Yes.
So the next stage after automating that script creation is to automate your deployment. How many of you guys were in the keynote? So most of you have seen the overview here. I'll just give you a quick zoom in on the wrong window. There we go. You can see we've got our environments across the top there. Development, test, staging, production. So we do put test and staging environments in.
Yay!
And there's projects we're working on and which versions are deployed to which environments. So you can you can visualize exactly what's going on.
So you need connections to all of those machines from this machine or the machine that you do.
That's actually coming up, isn't it?
It is. That
Again,
that's one of those
another good
excellent
question.
questions that's on the
Another
next
good
slide.
question. Yes. Excellent.
So you've seen that we can trigger this automatically from the command line. That was one of the stages of that automation before. So you can do continuous deployment. You can actually deploy straight out to your customer if you really wanted to. Most people don't do it that way. But you can do that at any stage through this process. So you can have continuous deployment to your development environment. So you have a shared development environment that's updated as soon as you make a change, which is really nice, actually. We use that for our own testing of Deployment Manager as we're developing it. Every time we commit a change, the change gets built and pushed straight out to a smoke test machine, which has automated test run on it as the change is gone, and we can all look at that machine at the same time. So that's combining all of the team's work into a shared central development thing that gets pushed automatically. Nobody has to trigger anything or wait for anything.
So you're practicing dog fooding.
We are indeed.
Like
our DevOps
Microsoft
team,
does.
Our
Yay.
DevOps team sometimes wishes we didn't. They kindly agree to be our guinea pigs. So what the normal thing to do, perhaps in a continuous integration environment, would be to trigger to development automatically like that, and then when you're ready, you can push it onto QA, onto staging, and onto production under some more manual control. But it's not just database schemas it's doing, it's the whole application. It's your application code for the web application. It can do Windows services as well. Mm-hmm. So, yes, that's the basis of using the scripts folder and the PowerShell script. So all that stuff that I've been building you up to is how we then make that push the database schema out as part of the entire application that you're pushing out. So just a bit of an explanation of how the whole thing is structured. We have the deployment manager server sitting on one machine that has a Windows service and a web portal. That was the front end that I showed you. And then out on your target machines, your environments, we have agents installed.
Wait. So you're going to install an agent on my production database server?
You're panicking, Alan. Is that
Uh,
upsetting you?
Let's put it this way. Processing cycles are really important to me on my database server, okay? And I'm not comfortable
Okay.
with an agent just,
Okay, there is another way you can do it.
Okay.
So for your web applications, you need to have access to the machine because there's no other way to push it and deploy it to IIS. But because you can have remote access to SQL Server, as long as you have your agent on a machine that can talk to your server, then it can just connect and use compare remotely.
very nice. I like that a whole lot better.
But it still allows you to have that break where you can have some machines not allowed to talk to production and install the agent on a machine that is allowed to talk to production.
Excellent. When you're making the change.
When you actually do the deployment but not running all the time.
Well,
Yes.
But if as opposed to when the service is installed, it's always sucking.
Exactly. That's the point.
Hi.
Now, this is independent of the specific continuous integration built to like CCNet or.
Yes, this is part of the deployment manager application. And deployment manager talks about everything in terms of packages. So those NuGet packages, which I haven't yet gone on to because that's the next slide. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Packages which are in a magic format that I'll tell you about in a minute are pulled, and deployment manager obtains them from the package repository and then pushes them out to your agents, testing, staging, production agents, using a secure connection. It's based on WCF with some secure encryption and certificates. So
once the package is in the repository, then you can manage the deployment manager and say, deploy this to any of these
Exactly.
environments.
Can that deployment be done by a trigger too? So
um,
that if a new build comes in and gets put into the package repository,
yes,
it will automatically get sent to testing. And
yes,
then
absolutely,
testing's not, then it can go to staging. And then
exactly. Yes, we'll do that in the demonstration a bit later.
Go back one more slide.
Uh-huh.
So if I have version 5, 6, and 7 in the package repository,
Mm-hmm.
and I push version 5 to testing, version 5 to staging,
Yes.
and I push version 6 to testing,
Yeah.
and I push version 7 to testing,
Yeah.
and then I want to push version 7 to staging, skipping version 6.
Yeah.
Will it handle that?
Yes. I like being able to answer that. So we've had enough slides now, I think. I'm going to actually take you through the deployment manager front end.
This deployment manager, is that part of the developer bundle?
No, it's
No, it's a new
It's new.
product, and I don't know how you guys are marketing in that.
So it's not currently part of the bundle.
Talk to Annabelle.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm development. I don't do any of that stuff. So what have we got here? This is actually not the deployment manager dashboard I was planning to show you. This is the one showing our live systems with playpen and dog food. So this is actually what we used back in Redgate.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so this is our internal, what we call the meta manager. So it's the one that's actually managing builds of deployment manager as we create new versions of deployment manager. So the reason it's not the demo version normally is that there's no database stuff going on in this. So it's maybe not as much interest to you guys. But
Yeah.
But I can still talk you through how the interface works, which is this thing. So this is the dashboard we've looked at before. It just shows you that you can customize the environments as well. They don't have to be the ones that we've given initially in the demos. They're whatever suits your environment. In the environments page, you see that each environment has a machine in it. This is simple again, there's only one machine per environment, but if you have server clusters, other reasons that you need multiple machines to be considered part of your live or development.
Availability groups, whatever.
Exactly. And then looking at the projects, you can see an overview of which version of that project is in each environment, recent deployments that have gone out, recent releases that have been made. Release represents a single or a group of versions, and the steps that make up deploying that application. So in this case, this is a Windows service, the deployment server, and this is the web portal.
Is your versioning synchronized across? Like, if you say you have your web app, your middle tier service, your backend database, can you synchronize their versioning across all three of them? So they'll look at
So, so to some extent, that depends on how you configure the continuous integration server that's feeding it. But you also get, when you create a release, which is a snapshot in time of the versions of the packages that you want to apply, you pick the versions from the server, versions of the packages, but you also specify an overall version for the entire release. So we have got our CI server synchronized so all those versions match, and that means that it automatically picks the right version there. Also, those are the three main parts that make up a deployment manager package, a deployment manager project. Sorry. And make deployment manager go away.
So if we want different connection strings in each environment, does that work at all?
Yes, thank you, James. I'll get that back. So the way that works is, if we go into the project again, these things called variables, which are passed into the PowerShell script that's run as part of the deployment as well.
You remember those variables we had at the top of the deploy.ps1 script earlier? The one that had the SA password? Yeah. Here they're defining them as variables that'll then get passed in to the deployment script.
And you can customize those per environment, so you have some variables defined here, and then if you need different variables for any purpose, really, you can customize that for the environment or a machine within the environment.
Is it easy to extend? Like, let's say in TFS, typically, you want to label your code before you do the deployment.
Mm-hmm.
After it goes to stage, maybe you want to promote it from one branch to another. Is that an easy hook to do in here? Is it still going to have to be a manual step by doing TFS? And related to that, I presume that it goes back and forth, right? I mean, right now, everything you've shown all day, there's going to be people making changes in QA, but like if I was actually made the change in TFS, that would actually propagate down to the kernel, right? Whoever's using a system has to be able to see that change.
Yeah, that's come from SQL source control. So yeah, that does follow through. It's probably easiest if you get a demo of source control afterwards, and we can show you how that works.
So what is this NuGet? Because when I started looking at this product, they said, well, deploy the NuGet repository, and I went, what's NuGet? So you want to talk about that a little bit for the DBAs in the room?
So NuGet is just a package technology. So it's a way of creating a package, and under the hood, all it is a zip file with some metadata in it. So that's actually fairly common. But the reason we use NuGet specifically is that it's an industry standard in terms of development world. It's a Microsoft technology that standardizes the metadata about the package IDs and versions. And it's supported by servers, repository servers that Microsoft provides for you. There's third-party technologies that allow you to explore the package repository as well. So it's a pretty well understood, and it's a well standardized system.
Okay, so then you're combining the database changes with the application changes in these NuGet packages.
Yeah, so the different components of your application go into different packages. So the database scripts folder ends up in the zip file of one package, which is your database package.
Oh, I see. So they're separate
Yeah.
packages, but then they're combined
Then deployment manager.
in Deployment
deploys them
Manager.
as well.
I got it.
That's it.
Okay.
So are you building the packages with PowerShell?
You build the packages with the NuGet.exe command line, which allows you to, yeah, so or via your continuous integration server. And you can deploy anything, because inside those packages, that's where you put the PowerShell scripts. We have deploy scripts that are run and deploy. There's also pre- and post-deployment scripts if you need to customize the process that way. And there's also some special support. So for now, Deployment Manager, as it started out, is fair to say more heavily focused on ASP.NET web applications. So it has some specialized support for making web config transforms without needing to do any PowerShell scripting at all.
But now a lot of the deployments that I'm doing are SSIS package updates. So I'll get a request from one of my clients to say, can you deploy this SSIS package? And I have to copy the files from the development server to the QA server and then run, essentially double-click the SSIS configure the manifest file, which causes the deployment to occur, during which I have to manually change the configuration before I can say, OK, go and do this, or else it won't be pointing to the right servers.
Yeah.
So how do we handle that?
Are you using the Visual Studio web deploy technologies for doing different versions of web config?
Yes, so the transforms are, it's the same, it uses the same technology to do those web transforms. So yes, the same transform files that you need to do that.
Okay.
And handling your SSIS, how did we do that? We dealt with that through PowerShell, having the PowerShell scripts in there, which makes you happy, doesn't it, Alan?
Of course it does. I like when you're using PowerShell.
So yeah, anything you can do on the command line or via PowerShell, and you can do a lot via PowerShell, you can do with Deployment Manager.
And by the way, the reason I like using PowerShell so much is because it's repeatable, right? It's always repeatable, and it's also scalable, and I'll talk about that later.
So you asked just now how we create the database packages. We've talked about creating the scripts folder and using the SQL compare command line. Well, the next steps to make these packages that Deployment Manager understands is, well, we get to remove that SA password.
Yay!
So should we say bye-bye to SA?
You guys know that in PowerShell 2.0 Plus, you can do multi-line comments.
Yeah, Alan taught me that earlier this morning. So
You don't have to put the hash sign in front of every line anymore.
So that's bye-bye SA, because SA is going to be provided by Deployment Manager instead. And then, yeah, you should really, but we're lazy. It is a dev machine.
Yes, thank you. Yep.
Yeah, you can no longer run it as a script on its own because you need the input to be supplied. Although I imagine you can supply variables.
You can. You can.
So you'd call it.
I've got a whole day where I talk about that stuff tomorrow.
Where this is? Oh no, this is on the wrong machine. Okay, so we'll skip over that because we're running short of time anyway because we've spent so long talking. But
yeah, but we're having fun.
we are. So you create the NuGet package using NuGet.exe, which sits in the same folder, and then zips up all of the database script folders and the PowerShell scripts into that zip file. But what we need to talk about a little bit is static upgrades and dynamic upgrades.
So what we've been doing so far has been dynamic upgrades. But
Yep.
the static upgrades, where we talked about the 4.0 to 4.2, the 4.2 to 4.4, 4.4 to 4.7, how many of you guys do Service Pack upgrades, Windows and SQL Server, right? You know how if you've got RTM and they've released Service Pack 2 and you never applied Service Pack 1, you don't have to. But if you have, it knows that and it doesn't redo that. That's what they've built into this. You want to explain how that works?
So what you can do is rather than applying the database change directly to the database, you create an upgrade script which gets stored in the package. So it compares an earlier version of the database against the state that you want and builds you that upgrade script using SQL compare, and then stores the upgrade script in the package, and it will store upgrade scripts for different versions of the database in the same package. So that package is able to upgrade all of the versions of the database that you have in production. And
So
that will
now
get
those
stored
of
in
you
the
who are
package.
developing software packages that you send out to your clients, you can just send out a single update it will look to see what version they're currently running, and you don't have to put a special version string in the database so it knows, right? It looks at the actual objects and then makes the appropriate changes, right?
Which allows you to review those scripts.
Yes, that too.
And there's also some extra validation you can then do. The first thing you can do is validate that there's no drift, so that what's in production is what you actually think is in production. Nobody has gone in and made changes in SSMS directly on production server. And if those changes have been made, no, of course not. If those changes have been made, your upgrade script's not going to work as you might expect.
So if we've got a client in the satellite somewhere that decided to get decided to do some localization for themselves, add additional columns for stuff that's important to them, and then you come along with this sucker and you run it, isn't that going to kill their stuff?
No, it's going to say that it's different, and basically abort. It just fails to do it, and it says, this is different. You're going to have to sort it out yourself.
And there's a special PowerShell script for when the deployment fails that it will run, that you can, even, send you an email saying, hey, they ran this, it failed, here's why.
These guys are getting squirrely.
Yep.
And the good thing is that the scripts are generated by compare, so they're all in a transaction anyway. So if the comparison fails, it's going to roll back, so it's not going to have made any changes to the database. It's all transactionally safe. The same is actually very nearly, as close as you can get it, true of the IIS side of things, because the package is applied to a new directory, and then IIS is just redirected to look at the new contents, which means there's only a very small window where you've got a change that's not in the new. So
Nice. Sir?
So, okay, so you said IIS, and then you said SQL. And of course, like the IIS changes, the web changes have to be coordinated with the SQL changes.
Yeah.
So if, for instance, one or the other fails, both will roll back?
Yes, if one package fails, it will fail the deployment, which then runs the deploy failed script.
Okay. So you have a dependency order, you do your database, then you do your IIS stuff.
You get to decide.
Database goes successfully,
Yeah.
then the web deploy fails. Does it then go and roll back the database?
No, it
Because
doesn't.
it's already successful?
No.
That's the disaster.
Okay. So it doesn't roll.
Why, right?
Yeah, it doesn't roll back things automatically at the moment. That's one thing we're considering for the future, but there's also some dangers in automatic rollback, as I was discovering and discussing it with some DBAs this morning. Some people would be very afraid of the idea of automatically rolling back, because
But that's what the PowerShell script is for?
yeah, so the PowerShell script lets you then decide what to do in the case of a rollback. So that's that logic that we've talked about. We can skip over that because we are running short of time.
We've got about 13 minutes left.
Okay, let me just see what slides we're coming up. So let's just have a quick look at the CI system.
CI?
Continuous integration.
Sorry.
And this specifically is the team city CI.
Yeah, this is not the one I want to be looking at, though. Come on, machine.
See, he's one of the developers on this product, so he's got all kinds of magic stuff on his laptop.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And now you have the SA password.
We do have some firewalls, though. So looking at the Team City setup here, this is one that actually does have some database in it. And the artifacts here, we can look at this package, which is this real database package. In it, you see that PowerShell script. It's more complicated now because it has a lot of logic to handle the upgrades. This is the database scripts folder. Again, more complicated. This state folder here is the full scripts folder for the database as you want it to be at the end of the deployment. And here is an upgrade script from version 0.14 of the database, and also a snapshot of the state of version 0.14 as we expect it to be. So this is how all of that magic about doing pre-validation and post-validation works. Because before you roll out, you can check that the target database actually is in the state represented here. And after you've run the upgrade script, you can use compare again to check that the state now matches the state here. And all of that's automated in the PowerShell script. Which we look at here.
How many of you guys are going to the PASS Summit this week? The PASS Summit? No? The big conference that's up at the Convention Center all week? Wow. Okay. Those of you who are, Michael will be there, and because if you didn't get a chance to look at this earlier today, he'll be there in the vendor area all week so you can get more specific information.
So yeah, we'll move on from that script, but that's handling all of those things that we were talking about. So how many of you guys have had the demo so far? Has anybody seen the demo? Come and see me and had the demo of it? There's, I think, just one. So. Of Deployment Manager, sorry. So you saw the keynote one, which is a quick one. We've only got 5 minutes left. But
No, we've got 10.
10, okay, cool. I can run through the demo really quickly on this.
Yay!
Because this is probably the most important bit.
Hello.
So here we have a widget shop project, which is based on the ASP.NET demo application. So it's got a database backend and an ASP.NET website. So what you're going to see here is an end-to-end demonstration of making database changes and application changes and seeing how that gets rolled out to deployment to your project. We've also got the current state of the development environment, which looks like that. So let's make some changes. Now I'm going to do this the wrong way. Sorry.
Demo mode, demo mode.
So here we go. Let's have a look. This is the database that's linked into source control. So this all ties into the source control system, and here I go into the table designer. I'm going to add a price column. And save it.
You notice what kind of data type he chose to? Really?
I didn't
An nchar for a numeric value? This is what gives DBAs gray hair!
So I didn't choose any data type there.
Don't we have a money data type?
Shh.
How does that work? You'd think I wasn't a developer. There we go. So you can see, I mean, I'm not going to do the full source control demo, but we've just commit these changes. So now there's a new price column, and that goes into source control. Let's go and make a matching change in the database application, so the web application. I'm going to change this query and add that. Does that say price now?
It says price.
Yay.
Yep, there you go.
So we'll add that, and
At least he's not using select asterisk, right?
Yeah, but he's still doing direct SQL.
Wait, select star, that's the beer that we're going to have as soon as we're done with this. I think I'm kidding. It's special branded for...
and just to make a visible change as well. There we go. Let's commit those changes to source control as well. And we'll have a look at that.
Yeah, those of you who haven't seen SQL Source Controller, you really should spend some time with it. It's really wonderful from being able to manage change in your database.
And you see that the CI server, continuous integration server, has already picked up that change we made to the database and is doing all of those steps necessary to build that database script step, database package. It's running tests as well. Those are T-SQL-T unit tests. So how many of you were in that session about T-SQL-T? Yeah, so this is now automating that as part of the continuous integration process. So if any of those tests fail, the build will fail and the rest of the steps won't carry on. So it gives you really good early feedback as well. That this has completed. And it has the package. It's also done a build of the web application there, and you just saw it finishing off the deployment, because that's what this stage does. It tells Deployment Manager to send out the deployment straight to our development environment.
So if we look at
So
Deployment Manager
Deployment
now,
Manager, and I hit F5 on that. That is currently deploying version 1.56. There we go. So it's downloaded that package from NuGet, from the repository that it was uploaded to by the continuous integration server. It's currently updating SQL Server on the development environment, which takes a while.
So this is kind of like forward integrating back up so that other developers can pick up the changes.
Exactly. And it's also a shared environment. Yeah, so you can develop against that database. So there we go, deployment's complete. And if I look at the development environment,
Bam!
Ah!
I didn't see a test fail.
No. That's probably me having typed something wrong in one of those things where I couldn't see the screen. So it
Correct.
did. So that probably. Let's have a look and see. Let's see what column I actually added. Sorry, I really can't see what I'm doing here.
Price is the name of the column.
I think I did. Yeah, that's why it triggered. So is that widgets, studio widgets, in development? Curse of the demo. No, it doesn't have the price column. Okay. So did it see that change? It thinks it did. Okay, this is. It thinks I did, but there's certainly not got one in there.
Can't you just delete the package and then rebuild the package?
No, it just went production last Thursday.
The deployment side of it worked fine.
Yes.
Right.
No. And yeah, you know, sometimes you see really bad reviews because the demos didn't work. But sometimes, you know, I've been in presentations where the presenter will have the demo go bad specifically so they can say, okay, here's how we solve this problem, right? Stacia Meisner did the best recovery from a demo failure going, okay, I know what happened, and ba-doom, ba-doom, ba-doom. And I learned more from that error than I would have if everything had worked properly. I can't answer. You can ask that guy. So real quick, while this thing is redeploying, after this, please go downstairs because we've got, as they refer to it in the UK, drinks. Okay? Over there they call it drinks driving. Here we call it drunk driving. So they have drinks downstairs. Please complete the event feedback. They're going to do drawing they're going to be doing a drawing for a ticket to the SQL Server Live conference in December in Orlando. I'll be doing 3 presentations there. Ed, you going to be coming to that? Middle of December? If you win the ticket, excellent, excellent. Also, they'll be giving away SQL Tool Belt, which is a wonderful set of tools. I don't know if you've ever worked with that. Also, again, the drink celebration all the way till 7 o'clock. So other events in other cities, it's only been 1 hour. Here, we get 2 hours. Yay! So let's see. And also, there's a goodie bag, T-shirt, and a SQL Server book to be given away downstairs. So I think pretty much everybody gets a book. They'll have a whole slew of books there for you to pick whatever book you want. Okay? Are we ready?
So I've just done a rollback. So let's see if we can persuade this to go back to life. It's still deploying it.
Installing the data.
Yeah, it's still thinking about it. So when things do go horribly wrong, at least Deployment Manager should make it easy to go back onto something that is working.
Well, so you rolled that on both the web and the database?
Yeah.
Well, it worked in the queue.
It
So how
did.
do you roll back? If you have some changes and you draw the column and you change the column, how do you roll back to the previous state?
So in this case, this is a development environment, so it's safe to just do these without worrying about dropping data because there's no data in it.
But if we want to do this before you take production,
Yeah, and actually, as a DBA, I run this stuff in QA, and if it doesn't work, I send it back, and it never goes to production, and I put QA back the way it was, and I don't let it go to production until I've seen it work
Which is
completely
the
in
point of having
QA.
separate environments and the point
Yeah,
of having
yeah.
upgrade scripts.
But if you're dropping columns and things like that, you actually want to write your code so it works with several versions of your database, so that you get your code working first, and then you drop a column at a later point, rather than
Right,
dropping a column and then finding out your code doesn't work.
exactly. Yeah.
I have prefixed all of my columns that I'm going to kill with deprecated.
Ah,
And then I have a script that I run for my next version that drops all columns that have the prefix.
that's a very nice idea. I like that idea. I'd never seen that.
That way I always have those columns for one.
Sure, sure.
So, one of the things, I find that I do a lot of data fix-up. So, you know, this guy's got his name wrong, and I've been told that a lot of the SQL compare tools and stuff like this from Redgate, they're not kind of built with that center in mind. I mean, I know the SQL data compare does that.
Mhm.
For instance, you'd have to, you'd write scripts and stuff like that in order to do that. What would be better ways to do that? I mean, how would you fit that into the deployment manager? I don't want to disturb them.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't catch the question. I do. It didn't check in, you're right.
It thought it did, though.
It certainly thought it did, but hopefully that's going to run through. But should we move on to...
Yeah, I would use the data compare product just by standalone for that kind of thing. So,
But you need to, I mean, typically you want to like put the resulting script in the source control.
yes.
But this, so would you have just another, can you add to the scripts directory manually?
Yes. Yes, you can.
And how do you get it to run then?
How do you get it to run?
If we inject our own scripts into the appropriate directory structure outside of the tool, how is the tool aware of those scripts?
So the compare command line looks at the entire contents of the directory. So when it's run, it's going to look at everything that's in there.
Well, for instance, it might be a data column that is updated.
Yeah, so if it's data is already supported as static data, so you can represent them as a bunch of inserts into the table in SQL.
But that's typically for like types, right?
Yeah.
A content type or whatever, right? But you talked about not doing that for most of your dynamic data.
Yeah.
And so how would you go about doing that for dynamic data, or would you not at all?
Are you talking like a post-deploy script? So you've made your DDL changes, now you actually want to do a data modification, like things that were A, you now want to spell out as Apple?
Or somebody decided that his name really was Smythe instead of Smith. So
Are you doing
see,
any other changes, or is that the only change you're doing? In other words, is it attached to some change in the database, or are you literally just modifying data?
Yes, just literally modifying.
yeah, see, that I wouldn't consider part of a deployment. That's just fixing data.
Well, only, yeah, I would like that if it was a reference table.
Yeah, that's what static data is for.
If it's a reference table, then I would include it here.
And there's a specific spot, right?
Yeah.
in
Right.
source control.
Exactly,
Mhm.
that's
But
linking with static data.
I find like the databases we have, we're always like fixing them. We belong to a different school. Okay, so I'll change them.
Here's
And,
a form.
and, yeah, I mean, you want those changes as well for like legal purposes anyway, to be under source control as well.
Well, I guess that would be a philosophical design pattern, right? Like, you might want to make the application team own that modification script. You might run it, but it's not really part of your